I'm going to take you through the components in Gtr Rig now. So we're going to go through amplifiers first. So as you can see, there's a whole list of amps, and the first one is the AC box, which is a perfect model of a late 1960s AC30. Really nice classic amp. And you've got, for the bass players, you've got a model of an Ampeg STV style amp. Very nice, one of my favourite bass amps, in fact. There's also a Citrus, which is an orange. There's a Coolplex, which is a sort of late 60s style Marshall dual volume head. And then you come on to the gratifiers, which are more like dual rectifiers, like Mesa Boogie style amps. Then there's the High White, which is a model of a high watt, most famously used by Pete Townsend. Then you've got a Hotplex amp, which is more of a Marshall style thing. The next amp is a Hot Solo Plus, which is actually a Solano amp, which is again really churning metal American sound. Then you've got a Roland Jazz Chorus, which is known most famously for its chorus and vibrato section. It was made in the mid-80s and it's a nice clean sound amp. And then you've got the Marshall JMP, which is of course a classic amp. Marshall late 60s, one of the all-time greats. There's a Marshall Lead 800 head, 80s Marshall, and there's a Plex, which is again dual volume, older style Marshall. There's a Ramfire, which is really heavy churning sound. There's a Twang Reverb, which is actually a model of a Fender Twin Reverb amp. It has vibrato on it, and it gives a nice clean sound. Then you come on to the 60s Fender Tweed amps. Now these are really nice. There's a Tweed Delight, which is a Fender Deluxe, which was a 30 watt, one 12-inch speaker combo that they bought out in the 60s. There's the Fender Tweedman, which is based on the Fender Bassman and amps like the Fender Bandmaster. There's the Ultrasonic amp, which is again heavy American metal style. There's a Van 51, which is also really churning heavy stuff. So that's all the amps covered, really. There they are, the amps. So let's shut the amps down and have a look at the next section. The next section is cabinets. You can choose like from speaker cabinets like that, but also there's a control room section. And what this enables you to do is if you put in the control room, what it does, you can choose your speaker cabinet. There's 2x12s, 4x12s, and not only can you choose your speaker cabinet, you can choose which microphone you're going to use to pick up the sound. Now, microphones have different sounds. The ribbon mic was a more natural sounding. A dynamic 57 is actually a Shure 57 dynamic mic, which is very common for recording guitars. A condenser 47, that's based on a Nyman U47, which is a really expensive microphone. Again, different sound. There's an 87, which is based on the Nyman U87 microphone. They're one of the standard microphones used. Dynamic 421, that's a Sennheiser 421, and the 441, again, that's a Sennheiser. The two buttons here are for mute and solo, and what you can do is actually balance different microphone sounds. You can use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 microphones, or not only that, you can pan them in the stereo field. So that's what these control rooms do. So let's go on to the effects now. Let's have a look at some effects. So there's plenty of good effects here. This is the delay and echo section. So the first one is the Delay Man. This is based on the Electro-Harmonix Memory Man, which was a 70s, 80s guitar pedal, Electro-Harmonix, big square thing. Great sound though. Then there's the Psyche delay, which is, as you can see, a floral sort of 1960s flower power type delay. Lots of Hendrixy delays and things like that, really nice. And then you've got the Quad delay, which is 4 digital delays, so you can set different speeds for the 4. Then you've got a Tape Echo, one of my favourites, which is a simulator of a tape delay. It was a loop of tape about a foot, 2 foot long, and it was in a loop between the two spools that played, and as you played into it, the tape loop went round and replayed your sound. That's what actually a tape delay is. Beautiful sound. Then you've got a Tractor delay. Again, this is just a standard sort of digital type delay, and there's also a twin delay. which again is a stereo type of delay. So that's the delays for you. Next up is the distortions. I'm sure you'd be interested in these. The first one is the Big Fuzz, which is based on Electro Harmonix Big Muff pedal. They also made a Big Muff Deluxe, which I actually own. Then next up is a Cat, which is a rat distortion. As you can see, the picture of the rat here. Yes, I own one myself, the Proco Rat. Definitely a churning, awesome distortion. And then you've got the Demon, which is a good distortion unit as well. You've got a digital lo-fi, which sort of trashes the sound rather than distorts. It's more of a sort of a bit destroyer. Then you've got a distortion that's actually based on the Boss Distortion DS1. As you can see here, it's got 3 controls, the first being volume, the second variable tone. When you turn it anti-clockwise, it's bassy. When you turn it right up clockwise, it goes trebly. And then the third knob is the distortion. This sets the amount of fuzz of distortion you're going to apply to the input signal. And then you've got a standard fuzz, just a 2-knob fuzz with volume and fuzz. And then you've got a gain booster. This is a sort of distortion, but very basic. It just boosts the signal, just gives it a bit of crunch and a bit of drive. A useful box. The Look Zone is like a variable distortion with a parametric EQ in the middle there. So you can actually cut or boost the middle frequency to change the sound of the distortion. There's a Mulholland drive. This is quite a dirty drive as well. And of course, there's the Ibanez Tube Screamer, you know, one of Stevie Ray Vaughan's favourites for that classic overdriven screaming blues sound. There's the Sledgehammer, need I say any more? The Trans Amp there, and finally a treble booster, which is actually really useful. You can set the amount of boost, how much treble's being added, and you can set the frequency, like how bright it is, which is quite useful as well. It's a very good treble booster, that actually. So that's all the distortions for you. So then we come on to dynamics. There's lots of different compressors, limiters and noise gates, noise reduction, bus compressors, that's basically just a compressor still, dynamics. And there's also a model of a Uri 1176. They called it the VC76 here. Look, it's a VC2A. That's actually the LA2. If you see my compressors video, you will know all about them. There's also a tube compressor. And there's also a model of a DBX 160, a classic compressor. There's a 1-2 knob compressor, various compressors, noise reduction, noise gates, fast comp, that's quite useful with an attack, and of course a limiter finally, which is good to put last in the chain at the bottom just to make sure your signal doesn't peak at all. You've got EQ units in various shapes and sizes. You've got graphic EQs where you can vary the different frequencies, fixed, cut or boost. You've got shelving EQs. Shelving means just there's either a low shelving, which cuts the low frequencies. It's always that shape on the frequency graph. And again, the high shelving, which cuts or boosts the top end frequencies. And there's a parametric equalizer as well. And there's also the solid EQ, which is sort of based on an SSL EQ, which is one of the best mixing desk companies. So that's all the EQs. You come on to filters now. What a filter does is just cut out the treble from the signal. So there's things like auto filters, which is like an auto wah for sort of funk. That's sort of quack, 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 and it just automatically. Or of course you've got a wah pedal, Crybaby, and you can actually link Gtr Rig up with a foot controller, so you could actually use the wah on a foot pedal. And there's a filter bank too, which sets the cutting or boosting of various frequencies. There's also a filter, a peak filter and a pro filter. There's a real wah pedal which models various wah pedals. There's a torque wah and a wah wah. So there's actually 4 different types of wah pedal in there. So that's all the filters for you. The next section is the modifiers. This is basically the sort of synthesis components. You get an envelope shaper, an LFO, input and a step sequencer. These are the sort of things that you would usually find on a synthesizer. So it allows you to sort of manipulate the sound. There's an analog sequencer, there's an envelope, and there's input level and an LFO, as well as a step sequencer. The next section is the modulation section. The first on the list is the Electric Lady, which is actually based on the Electro Harmonics Electric Mistress. This is one of the effects that Jimi Hendrix used to use a lot. It's a flanger pedal, got a great sound. Then next up is an ensemble. This is based on the classic Boss chorus pedal for that sort of Andy Summers Police guitar sound. Then the next up is a chorus flanger. There's a Phase 9, which is based on an MXR phaser. As you can see, the MXR phaser had a rate knob, which determines the speed. It's got depth, it's got colour. There's also other settings. If you click on the arrow on most racks, these are sort of expert parameters to tweak the sound even further. So that's the Phase 9, the MXR copy. Then you've got a rotator, which is actually a sort of Leslie speaker model. It was the speaker cabinet that came with the Hammond organ. It had a rotating twin tweeter that faced in opposite directions, attached to a sort of fan bell, and it would spin round while playing the treble note, so it gave a warble sound. That's actually what the Leslie cabinet was, as well as having a fixed stationary bass speaker, but it gives a very unique sound. Again, very, very 60s in sound. You've got a stereo tuner, and you've got a stoned phaser. The stoned phaser is based on a small stone phaser, very classic phaser. And you've got a tremolo unit for those wobbly 60s surf guitar sounds. So that's the modulation section. Going on, we've got pitch shifters, harmonic synthesizer, which is similar to the Electro Harmonics harmonic synthesizer. What it does, it sounds sort of synthetic in sort of, you can get some crazy sounds out of it. But it's like a guitar synth, one of the early guitar synthesizers that was available. Then you've got an octaver. What the octaver does is drop an octave up or down. In fact, you've got two different octavers in one, so you can have two different notes on top of your original. There's a pitch pedal for those Digitech whammy fans. There's a reso chord, again, sort of synthy, sort of puts a quack on it. And there's a transpose stretch, which is just a basic sort of harmonizer pitch dropper. So that's the pitch section. Then you've got the reverbs. There's various reverbs, the iceverb, the little reflector, the octa-quad, the reflector, the spring reverb, which is a sort of reverb that you find in amplifiers. It's actually a metal spring that the audio's passed through. But spring reverbs give a totally different sound to digital reverbs. They really are a totally different sound. But for those fans who want a studio-type reverb, there it is. There's a tractor reverb, and again, there's a vintage reverb, which models more older styles of reverb, like plates, for instance. It's a massive metal plate the size of a ping pong table that, again, audio's passed through and re-recorded with the original signal, and that's how you can get a reverb. Very collectible they are. And in the special effects section, you've got beat slicers, you've got beat masters, graters, grain delays, reverse grain ring modulators, tractor ring mods. So these are sort of, again, special effects, synthy stuff for weird sounds. If you want weird sounds, that's where to go. There's a container, there's crossovers. These basically enable you, this is like the routing, the patching section. It enables you to split the signal. So you can come in with one signal and then split it into two, which means you can go left and right, and you can actually apply different amplifiers. For instance, if I show you here, this has been split. So the signal comes in from here, from the top. I'll follow my cursor of the route. Comes into the wah first, then into the tube screamer. Then it hits the splitter. It splits into channel A and channel B. Now, in channel A is the stuff below it. So it's got a twang verb and a control room on the left channel. On the right channel, it has the hotplex and the control room. So that's your left and right channel. Those are then fed into the split mix, which is your left and right pan, which is your left and right volume control over the 2 amp channels. There's pan controls as well. So now you've got the stereo signal, left and right signals back together again, passing through a volume, through a rotator, a reverb, another amp, just to add even more chaos to it, which is what I added in earlier, tape echo. So that's the order. You can come in as a mono or stereo signal, split it into left, right. You can stay in individual left, right, or you can come back into a group, or you can stay in mono. All the options are available to you in Gtr Rig. So that is all the components explained for you. The next video will be on how to use Gtr Rig, how to make patches. There's so much to explain. So I hope that the explanation has helped you understand Gtr Rig a bit more, and there'll be Gtr Rig Part 2 coming soon. Bye now.